notes for today. I'm sorry, but maybe next time. In terms of where I want to start, I wanted to go back a little bit to what we touched on during the kickoff of like, what is Web3? I think this is one of the first concepts that we just kind of have to like wrap our head around to like understand kind of like the ecosystem in general. So this is just like a brief reintroduction again to some of the things I mentioned last time. So like the phases of the internet, if we break it down into 3 phases, would be Web 1, which is more of a read only, the ability to share information, but not a lot of interaction. You have the ability to remain anonymous. You have the ability to share information. Everything was like sort of like uncensorable. Web 2 included introducing read and write. Interactions begin, stuff like, Twitter, Facebook, that type of thing. But the thing is, like, it's much more censorable. The data is no longer free and easily shareable. It is stored on databases. It is owned by these large corporations who handle a lot of these interactions. Come in Web 3, where we kind of like bring back some of the fundamentals of Web 1 and then introduce further concepts, is like the internet for the individual. Supported by blockchain technologies, native payments, and data owned by the user. So that comes to the next question: what is a blockchain? So blockchain is a distributed database shared among nodes on a network. Nodes is just a fancy term for a computer. So there's just computers kind of like all over the world that have copies of this database. And we're going to dive into a little bit of a visual of that in a second. These are complex data linked by puzzles. All of the data on the blockchain fit together in a specific way, just like a jigsaw puzzle. And we'll see that again in a second. Consensus stops us from changing history. So our distributed database has copies of the blockchain distributed all across the world, going back to those nodes. And it becomes a source of truth. It's a permissionless source of truth where we can house different types of data. What does all of that mean? I have a little bit of a demo of a blockchain demo. I'm going to drop this link as well in the chat. I think it's like super awesome for like just getting a visual. And we're going to be using this demo a little bit throughout when I introduce like different DeFi and NFT projects as well. But if we look at the most basic piece of information that is saved on a blockchain, that starts off with data, right? All data is cryptographically turned into a hash value. This specific instance uses what's called a SHA-256 hash algorithm. You don't need to know like the deeper workings of that. In like the EVM world, we use something called Ketchek. I don't remember the numbers, but it's a slightly different algorithm. But in essence, it's the same thing. You have some data. I have my name in here, and there's a hash value associated to my name. If I do something as simple as like changing the capitalization of my name, the entire hash value changes. If I add an extra space, the entire hash value changes. But like some amount of data is represented by this hash, right? We go to the next step here, a block. A block holds the data. Right now, you'll see that it's green. It has a block number. It has a nonce. Nonce is just a value that we use specifically. It's like a number used once that is used to determine what this hash value here is. And you'll see that this hash value has a leading 4 zeros. This is just for the sake of this demo. We're saying that any hash value with a leading 40 is a valid hash on this blockchain. This is not true across all blockchains. This is just for this demo purpose. So what if I do something like, again, adding my name inside of this data? Everything turned red. We no longer have leading 4 zeros. What I can do here is click this mine button. And what's happening is like there's an algorithm in the background that is just like going through numbers, just like spinning through different numbers until eventually got to 5,502, which is the correct nonce for if the data is my name. And we once again have a leading 40, meaning this hash value is correct and this block is valid.
Rahat, could you maybe just repeat what a nonce is? I don't quite understand that.
Yeah. So nonce is it's a number that is used once to. So if we look back on this hash value, This hash was just based on one piece of data and giving us back this like hash value here, right? If we look on a block, once again, we're still hashing the entire thing, right? But we're hashing the data based on whatever actual string of data is in here, as well as the block number, and as an extra precaution, a nonce. So what we need is a specific nonce that when we mine, we get a leading 4 zeros in the hash.
I see. Okay, so like can it be understood as, because for this particular block, four leading zeros is like the identifier for a block. So because we can't really change the block number and the data, which is kind of our inputs,
Right.
the nonce acts as like another input, which is controlled by like the block to make sure that the blocks are valid. Does that
Exactly.
kind of make sense? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Awesome.
Cool. So now let's take a whole blockchain, a bunch of blocks that are linked to each other. We're going to go to the end of the blockchain right now. This is not a very big blockchain, just 5 blocks. But you'll notice that now there's an additional value here. There's this previous value. Previous just links back to the hash value of the block that preceded it. So every block is linked to its parent using this previous. So you'll see it's 4 zeros, AE8, 4 zeros, AE8 over here, and so on and so forth. Every previous value is linked to the hash value of the block that came before it. So I can, do things same way, add my name in here, mine this to make sure that, again, this hash has at least 4 leading zeros. But what if I went back in time? And let's go to block 3 and add my name there. I added my name here. Not only did this go red, every single other block on the blockchain went red that came after it. What I would have to do in order to make sure all of these are valid, I would have to remine this, this, and this, because now the previous value has changed. So we need a new nonce that gives us that hash of 4 leading zeros. So again, just building up on what a block is, but adding the blockchain bit, which is adding the previous values on each block. Now let's look at the distributed version of this. So, I could like go into one of these blockchains, go into block 3 and add some data, remine things, right? And then all of a sudden, oh, we have a valid blockchain, right? But this could be some malicious data. When we come to a distributed blockchain system, even if I went into, let's say, block 3, added some data, remined everything that came in after that, great, this looks like it's a valid set of blocks. But if we look at the overall consensus, we have different peers. Peer A says that the first 5 blocks include this string of data. Peer B says that block 3 does not include that data. Peer C also says that this block does not include that data. We take the consensus of what the majority of the blocks say, and peer B and C wins. It's like it's democracy, sort of. And peer A becomes not valid. So we were looking at that from the standpoint of just like strings and data. So now we're going to go into like the first use case of DeFi. So what I have here instead of just like a bunch of strings is like actual transactions, people sending money, US dollars to each other. And this is where like that consensus really comes into play, like where you can really leverage the power of the blockchain. Essentially, we're creating a public ledger, right? So we have some information here. Darcy sending $25 to Bingley, everyone sending money to each other, et cetera, et cetera. What if I wanted to do something malicious? I go into block 4, and instead of going from Rick to Sam, Rick is going to send some money to me, and he's going to send like a lot of money to me, right? I go in there, I remine that, I remine everything that came after that. Cool, looks like it's valid. Rick now has apparently sent me this much money, right? Not really, because peer B and peer C say that this was not a valid transaction. This is a very simplified version of this, by the way. So this is not like in the real world how it would actually work, but this is just to give you a base level idea. If I were to go in and remine this and maliciously say that Rick owes me this much amount of money, the overall consensus of like the distributed database says that no money was ever sent to Rahat. This amount of money was actually sent to whoever it was. Yeah. I think it's over here. Yeah, Rick sent money to Sam, not to me. So that's like a very high level overview of how blockchains kind of like serve some of this data and actually allow us to have this like trustless source of truth for doing transactions, sending money, sharing data between folks as well. So that leads us now to the first use case of for blockchain technologies, which is DeFi. We saw a little bit of that with the tokens being sent around, but what is DeFi? DeFi is financial technology that is based on secure distributed ledgers, like we saw with that demo. The system removes the control banks and institutions have on money, financial products, as well as financial services. So rather than us having to, have an intermediary like a bank, like PayPal, etc., we're now able to leverage blockchain technology to send funds from one person to another, and that's like the very basic use case of what you can do with DeFi in this kind of space. One of like the things that I like to share in these instances is just like, I have friends who live in like sanctioned countries that we're not allowed to interact with from like the US, whether that be someone in a place like Iran, in a place like Palestine. If I were to send them money, not only would they probably not be able to receive it through traditional means like their bank account, their bank accounts might get like flagged and shut down. Mine would get flagged and shut down because people would like flag that as like, oh, you're supporting terrorist activity or something like that. And something like this allows for like those folks who are underbanked, underprivileged, who suffer in these systems, who like are not part of any of these malicious activities, but have to suffer because they live in a place where a lot of these malicious activities take place. We now have like other ways to like interact, send money, do things like just like have some type of like economic sense of life. Recently saw that many women in Afghanistan use blockchain technologies because they don't have access to funds, they don't have access to a bank. This is an alternative for some of them. So now we kind of like see the basis of like what blockchain does in DeFi. I wanted to look at a couple of existing DeFi applications in the Polygon ecosystem. First one is SushiSwap. So Sushi is one of the top DeFi protocols that have been launched on Polygon. You can trade tokens, so something similar to what we saw before of like a distributed blockchain ledger sending money back and forth between people at a high level. That's a very basic way of looking at the architecture of something like SushiSwap. You trade tokens. You can earn tokens by staking or lend and borrow tokens to earn interest. So if we took that like initial demo a little bit further, we could do things like now instead of just sending money to someone, can I stake this into like another contract and earn some type of like interest, some type of revenue or something from there? That's like additional data information that we can start tracking on the blockchain. Another very popular example in the DeFi space is Aave, which is a lending protocol where you can earn interest, borrow assets, even build your own lending decentralized applications using their protocol. There's like, again, like a bunch of different solutions in the DeFi space for you to start, building your own, whether you want to do something like, you know, being able to have people send money back and forth, do things like borrowing, earning interest, that type of thing. Now, I kind of wanted to open it up to you folks. I would love to, if you want, you can do this. You can answer this question by dropping it in the chat or coming off mute and just giving off an idea you might have. What are some DeFi apps that you might want to build? Any
So,
ideas? Yeah,
Rahat, before I just had one question.
sure.
Maybe this is more financial as opposed to DeFi specific, but I wanted to know what's the difference between staking and earning tokens or whatever, and lend. Like, I assume that you earn interest by lending, right?
Right,
Or the borrower kind of needs to pay the interest, right?
right.
That is how I understand that. So I understand. I want to know how that's separate, how that's different from staking. Maybe it's
Yeah,
more of a banking question, but I just want to.
no, definitely. I can touch on that really quickly at a high level. So staking would be something like essentially providing liquidity to a an exchange, right? So when Sushi Swap, for example, does a lot of their exchanges, people are sending tokens to each other all the time. They need to have like a huge reserve of liquidity to make sure they can support that. To incentivize people to like help them keep that liquidity intact, they have things like staking. So what you would do is like you would stake your tokens, whether it be like ETH, Matic, any number of tokens that they support. You would add that in and basically become like a liquidity provider, where Sushi would then have access to the liquidity that you have staked through their contract. And what would happen there is like this giant reserve of liquidity is used to make sure that those tokens and transfers happen you know in in um, in a way that people are able to go about trading in any way they want. In some cases, staking might lock you in for a certain period of time. In some cases, there's like liquid staking where you can like put your tokens in and out at any time. But what this does is like they incentivize you by like paying you certain fees. So it's similar to earning interest, but rather than like lending in to like another person or whatever, you're more just providing that liquidity so that the protocol can do their like average like daily activities. People can like trade tokens easily without having the need to constantly add more liquidity to the pool, if that makes sense.
I see. So, just to again just put this in banking terms, I'm assuming staking would be something like opening a deposit, basically like opening like a fixed deposit kind of an account wherein the bank pays you an interest, which is usually lower than what a bank would charge when you lend money or borrow when you take out a loan, let's say. So
Mhm.
that's kind of how they manage the money. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I'm not a financial person,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it that sounds, yeah, about
Okay,
right.
okay.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. So, any ideas on DeFi apps that folks want to build? Have you ever thought about building something in the DeFi space, in the financial space? Drop any ideas that you have in the chat. Come off chat. You can uh, shout it out as well. I'll give folks like maybe 20, 30 seconds.
Rahat,
Yeah.
I'm not talking about an idea, but I had a little doubt, which just talks about staking with Safar.
Hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, as you talk, in staking as well, we earn interest, and at the quick swap exercise we did, we are becoming the liquidity provider of a particular token pair, and there as well we are earning APY.
Right.
So, isn't those two concepts are similar, like, or there's a major difference which I'm not able to point out?
Yeah. It's a little bit of a gray area, I think, in my opinion, of like the difference between like staking and like lending. Um, with lending, you know, they're I don't even want to know if I don't even want to say it's like riskier. Um, yeah, this is like more of a financial question that I might not be able to answer, to be honest.
Just to add on to that, I guess it depends how your tokenomics are, right? Because some borrowing platforms also keep tokenomics is that their users get interest in their own native tokens.
Right.
So something like liquidity or something, so that they get LQTY tokens. So I guess that depends. It's a gray area, right?
Yeah. At the end of the day, you're kind of like still earning fees based on like money transactions or money in general. So it's very similar concepts, where in one case maybe like the use case is for, you know, transactions and everyday kind of things to run smoothly, and the others like for specific purposes of like borrowing money, for I think it's more like the reason behind why you're staking or borrowing the money is like the real difference, to be honest.
And one more thing I would like to clarify, Rahul. With DeFi adapt, can we assume like any kind of application which supposed transfer of tokens is a DeFi application? Can you say that?
In theory, yes. Like if you're supporting, um, yeah, if you're supporting transfer of tokens, theoretically, I guess you're part of the DeFi ecosystem. Um, you know, that might be like more just like a simple use case in DeFi versus like doing, you know, something more complex like, you know, staking, you know, borrowing, that type of thing. Um, but yeah, I think that would be kind of up to you to decide like what do you consider a DeFi application or not. Is sending tokens enough to be DeFi? Maybe it is. Or is like, you know, do you want more use cases out of your DeFi application? If that makes sense.
Yes, sure.
Cool. So I'll throw out some DeFi potential dApps that you can build, you know, after you start learning. These are some like cool things that you can like start off with, just to either start learning or like start thinking about things like a Buy Me a Coffee decentralized app. If you've ever used like Buy Me a Coffee, it's just like, you know, being able to send someone like $5 or something for something cool that they did, right? Crowdfunding dApp, pretty similar type of thing to Buy Me a Coffee, except it's for, you know, larger amounts of funds, larger amounts of money. Doing things like non-interest based financial apps. That's just something I've been interested in figuring out, like how that would work. I don't know if that would work or not, to be honest. But just like, you know, looking at the different things in the financial world and seeing what we can bring to Web3. And then things like decentralized exchanges like SushiSwap, Uniswap, that type of thing are different things that you can potentially build. I've seen like exchanges built into games. I've seen exchanges built into just like regular interfaces as well. So like there's a lot of different things you can do. DeFi can be sort of like a standalone kind of thing. And this might go into your question from earlier. Like you can bring DeFi into like a gaming app. You can bring DeFi into NFTs, which we'll see in a second. And you know, it doesn't have to be like a one size fits all thing. It can like borrow from, you know, different parts of the ecosystem.
Yeah, Rahul, I had a question for you. The question is that if I have a decentralized application, okay, which is actually a chat decentralized application where you can
Right.
actually transact, like you can actually send money to your friend or anyone. Okay, so will you call it a DeFi app? Will it be called as a DeFi app?
I mean, if it has the ability to send money, then why not? Yeah, sure.
Yes, so the
Um,
basic entity is that transaction. You call it as a DeFi app.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like when we started this conversation with like the demo, like the most basic implementation of DeFi is just like the ability to send tokens, the ability to send money from one person to another. That's like the very basic level of like what blockchain has like enabled us to do, what Web3 has enabled us to do with this specific type of technology. So yes, I would say that adding that capability to another application does make it like that could be like a social or whatever messaging app with a DeFi component of being able to send funds from one another. Because at the end of the day, PayPal, if you look at like something like PayPal, they started off as just being able to like link your bank account and send money, right? Now they have a whole bunch of other things, but would you have said that they're not a financial company? No, because they're dealing directly with money and being able to and facilitating the transfer of that money. Same kind of concept here. You have this like messaging or chat app or whatever, and there's a component here, a DeFi component of being able to maybe like link your wallet, send some type of funds from your account to that person's account.
All right, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Anything else on specifically on DeFi before we move to NFTs?
I've read some articles on DeFi and gaming, and it was called GameFi. Can you please explain how it works?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of hype around right now of like play to earn. So there's some really cool, and I'm going to show you actually one of them in a second during like the NFT portion of like games that you can play, and then you can just like start earning tokens, right? Whether that be doing certain actions in the game, winning certain things. I've seen games that have like staking built inside of them, where like there was this like farming game or something. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Where like you go to a farm and like the UI is like you like planting some seeds and doing some like really corny dumb stuff. Maybe Townstar. But in what happens in the background is that like when you're planting these seeds are represented by like tokens that you own in your wallet. So you're providing, it's still like you're doing some liquidity providing for like a decentralized exchange that exists in the game. But it's just like turned into this nice little UI of like, oh, I'm farming some stuff, and making a DeFi Kingdom. There it is.
Hey Rahat,
Mhm.
I had this one question. Like, in case of like decentralized exchange, DeFi exchanges are kind of which works on the liquidity kind of stuff, not the order book like which in case of like centralized exchange. So in such a case, how do we check the actual price of like tokens or like anything? As far as I know, it's based on the external sources, like we call them like oracles, or is there any other way that I don't know?
Yeah, oracles are really going to be your main source of information for a lot of these. I think like one of the more popular ones is Chainlink for grabbing a lot of that information. At the end of the day, there's price, a lot of the pricing and effects. Like if we're looking at like comparing to something that's like comparing like Matic token to USD, you can't really do that on chain, right? Because the US dollar itself does not exist on the blockchain. So you need something like an oracle to compare values from the blockchain to something that's outside of it. So oracles kind of become like essentially what you need to like plug into the outside world to understand the financials of like what's going on there to compare to what's happening on chain.
Cool.
Cool. Any last questions? Cool. So we'll move on to NFTs. So what are NFTs? Wanted to like highlight the difference between something that is fungible and non-fungible. So fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens. Fungible tokens are assets where there's like a like for like value that exists. So if like, if I gave you $1 and you gave me another dollar back, nothing really happened, right? We just exchanged two exact denominations of money. Other fungible tokens, what is fungible? Dollars, any type of fiat currency, any tokens. ETH is fungible, Matic is fungible, Bitcoin is fungible, because they all have like denominations. They exist. You can trade them. They're not unique in any way. Non-fungible, something that is unique, that does not have a like valued asset. And I usually like putting the picture of Mona Lisa up to show that the Mona Lisa is an NFT. Why is it an NFT? Because you can go to the museum and take a picture of it, aka take a screenshot of it, but you do not own it. It is still owned by the the museum. You can go to the gift store and buy a replica keychain that has the Mona Lisa on it, but you do not own the Mona Lisa, right? So there is a verifiable owner of the Mona Lisa. I don't know exactly who that owner is. I think it's the museum where it's hosted, but there is some documentation that says, okay, this entity or person owns the Mona Lisa. So keeping that in mind, what does an NFT look like? The current popular version of an NFT is, PFP collections, Bored Apes, pictures of rocks, pictures of like goblins, and goblins are all the rage these days or something like that. And this is one type of NFT. It's the popular profile picture collections that can sell for very, very large amounts of money, except when, current market conditions. But yeah. And what we do is like we can exchange our cryptocurrencies for these collectibles. You can use your fungible tokens like Ethereum or Matic on Polygon network to purchase them, right? But what exactly are they? Are they just these pictures? Not quite. The actual NFTs, kind of like what I mentioned before, of like there is a verifiable, at least in not on chain, but like in the real world, there is some documentation that says, the entity or the museum that owns the Mona Lisa is whatever it is. This is taken a step further when we go into NFTs. NFTs are data. They are receipts that point to a specific store of data. So what you see now is what's called a JSON object, right? This is a real life NFT. I lied when I said that there would be no wrap element to this. There is a small wrap element to this. I created this NFT when I first joined Polygon as a developer advocate. And what this is just like a video of me doing a wrap announcement that I joined the team. But I wanted to break down the data that actually powers this NFT. First thing we have is a name, just Rahat joins Polygon. Next is a description, et cetera, et cetera. Then we have an image. This is the image placeholder that you would see on a place like OpenSea, on an exchange like OpenSea or like Rarible or wherever you might look. And this is hosted on a decentralized platform like IPFS. It's just a PNG file. Then there's this like animation URL. So this is like the actual video. I'll drop the link if you're interested in this later. But this also points over to like an MP4 so that if you open up the NFT, a video will start playing. And then you have your attributes. So if you've ever like dealt with NFTs before, you might recall that some NFTs have like different traits, some that are like more rare than others or whatever. This is how those attributes or traits are actually listed. You have like a trait type and then a value for that trait type. If you wanted to see like exactly how this data should be structured, OpenSea has like some awesome documentation on that. There is a specific standard that you must follow for all NFTs. So this specific object follows that standard. And what we essentially do here is, we're showing that, NFTs are just powered by these JSON objects. That's what it is. It's a JSON object. And there's a lot of powerful things that you can do with JSON objects because they're just data, right? But it's how you use that data that really affects like what this NFT can do. In my case, like normally you would look at an NFT, it could be a profile picture, but then all of a sudden I have this animation URL. Now I have a video that is an NFT, right? So there's a bunch of different things you can do here. This animation URL can be a video, it can be an MP3 file, it can even be an HTML file. So if you wanted a whole web application, you can take that and turn it into an NFT. What an NFT does is on the blockchain, it's just going to say, okay, this is a thing that is owned by this specific person. So if we look at it in the blockchain demo side of things, oh no. Let's go back to just this block. Let's do this. Before I was typing in data like my name or whatever. What if I did something else like, you know, and this is not done like the correct way, but like just as a high level overview. This is an NFT. The title is, I don't know, Bored Apes. You have something like an ID. Owner is going to be, let's see, I'm just going to grab my address. I grab my address. Now we know that I am the owner, and then location of file would be like www.google.com, something like that. I mean, essentially, it's recreating this, putting that data on the blockchain, right? So now we have this verifiable source of truth on the blockchain where I can say, okay, anything that's associated to this specific address, for this specific address, this person owns this entire piece of data. That includes this image, that includes this animation URL. And now we have this like verifiable on-chain receipt saying that, hey, Rahad is the owner of this NFT. You know, instead of just having some document that lives out in the world that, you know, is verifiable in some ways. Like you can, like if you look at the concept of the Mona Lisa, like you can probably go to some public access point. You can probably look at some like whatever online ledger or activity there is of like who owns it. But all of that is disputable. All of that is, you know, is subject to like, you know, laws, lawyers, and like whatever they do. And this introduces the concept of like verifiable ownership of some digital asset. And that's kind of like the power of NFTs, like what you can do with them. They're not necessarily profile pictures. Profile picture is one application of what an NFT is. So a couple of popular projects in the Polygon space, we have something like Avagachi. So these are NFTs that are minted on Polygon. They double up not only as PFPs, but like as little digital pets that is part of this like gaming protocol. Within this gaming protocol, you can actually earn money. You can like, I believe, stake certain amounts of funds like with your Avagachi pet. I don't know the 100% of the specifics, but like it brings in like some of the DeFi stuff that we talked about before and combines it with this like concept of NFTs. You have, you know, your little pet who can do things like, you know, earning you money, earning you interest on like different things you provide, whether it's like staking through liquidity providing or being like someone who allows your funds to be used for borrowing and earning interest. So what NFTs can really do is like provide like a nicer UI, a nicer experience for the end user to be able to like access some of these other protocols of like DeFi, etc. Another awesome NFT project minted on Polygon is from Developer DAO. This is called Pixel Devs. This little pixel dev here is mine. But essentially the initial offering from Developer DAO was an NFT collection based on Ethereum. And then what a lot of people do then is like, they like building on top of different ecosystems. And like Developer DAO itself was built around the loot ecosystem, which was just like the NFT was just an image of a bunch of words. and like you can then take those words and do something. Like the original loot thing was just like, you know, different characters inside of a game. So like you could have like a warrior NFT that had like specific weapons and magic and abilities or whatever, and then you take that and you build a game around it. You do, you know, whatever you want to do with it. And in this case, for Developer DAO, we took that concept, and there were just like traits of like what language do you use, what country is your developer from, what you know, currency does it use. Mine, I think, uses Bitcoin. But you know, these NFTs are minted on different networks. The derivative of the initial one was minted on Polygon, so it looks at the initial NFT that was there on you know, the Ethereum main network, and creates a new one on the Polygon network. So again, I'm going to give this to y'all. What are some NFT projects that you want to build? Or any
Hello,
questions
Rahat.
about NFTs? Yeah, go ahead.
Like some time back, there was this discussion of Bill Gates at TechCrunch where he said that NFTs are 100% greater fuel theory. So, what is your opinion on that?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
So, yeah, recently there was a TechCrunch meeting in which Bill Gates said that NFT is 100% greater fuel theory, in which he said that. So, what is your perspective on that?
You know, I would say, you know, there's definitely a lot of folks from like, I guess, older tech backgrounds who don't quite like the way NFTs are being used. And on the surface, what I think the reasoning behind him saying a lot of that stuff is just that, you know, if we're looking at NFTs, you know, majority of NFT projects are really just like some pictures of like some animal and some adjective, and then they build up a lot of hype around it. Is there an actual project behind it? Some people say there is, some people say there isn't. And, you know, there's a lot of rug pulls. There's a lot of people who just like put out these collections, promise a lot of things, make money, and then disappear. And I think it's because of that kind of culture, that kind of like, because that's so rampant and has been so rampant over the past year or two in the NFT space, why, you know, these folks are saying this type of thing. But I think there are definitely a lot of use cases for cool things in NFTs. So I'll just like go really quick to the next slide just to show what some of those are. Like on-chain NFT assets for games. Like if you look at the gaming industry, like if you were to play a game, like one of those games that like force you to spend a bunch of money to buy in-game assets to like level up your character, to actually build up on it and do well in that game, you know, and then all of a sudden there's a sequel to that game, like your assets don't transfer over. You can't, like all that money that you spent is kind of for no reason, right? You know, NFTs kind of like change that a little bit, where like those assets can actually travel with you to different games. So that's like one use case that I like pointing out. There are things like dynamic NFTs that change based on like external inputs. I recently did like a tutorial on like dynamic NFTs, where you can do like a whole on-chain battle or game with them. You know, we talked a little bit about, you know, that this piece of data here, this JSON data, like what if you can update this throughout the life of your NFT, right? There's ways you can do that to create like more dynamic NFT experiences. One of my really
just one question. I hear a lot about like dynamic NFTs and like upgradable smart contracts. Like, how does that make sense when like the essence of blockchain is non-fungibility and like immutability of the whole code? So like, I just like to know something about that.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of like dynamic NFT specifically, when you're creating an NFT, there's a specific functionality for setting like the actual URI, right? Or like the data like this that actually governs what that NFT is. In general, when you deploy a contract, what you can do is have certain functions on that contract that can be called later on, like without even like redeploying a new contract. One of those functionalities can be updating the URI of your NFT. So you can bake that into the contract where or I can say, like, let's say I have like a video game character, like a warrior inside of an RPG game, right? If that warrior does some stuff inside of the game and they level up, I want that data to be reflected on the NFT. So what I would do is, like, within the game, once you take specific actions, and the contract will track, like, has this specific action been satisfied? Have they gotten to this point in the game? Have they leveled up to this certain amount? If those satisfactions are met, we can call this update URI functionality to update the actual NFT itself. So so that still kind of like preserves the essence of like immutability, because these are specific functionalities that are agreed and governed by the contract when it was deployed. With the other concept that you mentioned up of like, upgradable contracts, upgradable contracts are, in essence, yes, they do kind of go against the ethos of like immutability, on the blockchain. But with upgradable contracts, what you have is kind of like a proxy. The proxy says that, like, this was the initial contract that was deployed. That's not going to change, but there was some issues with it. Maybe there was a bug, maybe a security flaw. The proxy is going to say, hey, rather than going to this contract, here's a redeployed version of this contract with those updates, with those actual security measures kind of placed in. You still have the ability to point yourself to the initial contract. That doesn't change. But the upgradable thing here is that, like, rather than using the flawed version of the logic, you can then use the newer version of the logic that allows you more higher security, if that makes sense.
Right.
So you still have the
Right.
choice of using the original version.
I see. Also about the dynamic NFT, the thing that you said about using a function to modify. I was under the impression that once you mint an NFT, it gets stored as like the data within the block, right? So like the
Yeah, so you're not going back and changing block data. Whenever you want to make updates, this would be data saved onto a new block. So you would look at the full history of like blocks that are associated with this NFT. You would add a new block to the chain that says, like, hey, this was the initial data for this specific NFT, but we're instead going to be displaying this other information. So that initial data never goes away. That's still there. Historically, you can go back and look at it, but you're adding new data that is being served as like the current source of truth, and will be like chosen to be displayed on your UI over the previous data.
Right. Got it. Thanks, Rahul.
I had a question.
Mhm.
So, can we just say that NFTs are like basically proof of ownership? Like they're used to represent certain object on the blockchain, and then prove that this belongs to some person. And if that is the case, then like we talked about using NFTs in games and stuff. But how can we try to get representations of actual real world physical objects on the blockchain using NFTs?
Yeah, if I could tell you that, I'd be like very rich and maybe not here. A lot of people are trying to figure that out. There is a project out there. I think it's called Americana, where these guys like created this chip that you can put on like real world assets, and then it like analyzes the asset and puts it on chain. And that concept is like crazy to me. It's like, wow, that they like are trying to do stuff like this. But yeah, the technology right now is very new. There are applications of it. I mean, it's awesome that you're thinking about that. Maybe it's something you can take on. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people are experimenting in this space to figure out like how we can like actually bring real world assets into the blockchain.
Yeah, got it.
Hi Rahat. So NFTs and bringing NFTs the leverage of utilization is kind of difficult because of, as you said right now, real world and philosophical challenges. But something related to game NFTs is that you have to reward, let's say you have to reward a user for completing a quest, and that happens through the game is operating on a web 2 level right now, and you have to reward them with a web 3 thing. So there needs to be a connection between these two things. So like if the game is run on a cloud server, so there needs to be a secure connection between the server and let's say the blockchain. So how do you ensure that? Like, my concern is key, how do you store a private key and ensure it's not getting hacked somehow?
Yeah, that's definitely something that's on a lot of people's minds. Right now, a lot of current like implementations of games and even like popular dApps are still very heavily supported by like cloud servers and like Web2 technology. Like even OpenSea is very heavily dependent on AWS. It's heavily dependent on like their own database servers, as well as I think like Cloudinary and other Web2 services. Like we're this still goes back to like we're still very early in the game, and a lot of these technologies are still being developed. You have certain solutions like, in terms of like storage, IPFS and Arweave are both like developing and doing things where you can like have assets and things kind of saved to like a decentralized database. Then you have protocols like not bundler, I can't recall their name off the top of my head, but you have protocols that are trying to do things like create like streams of data in a decentralized manner. I think there's one called like GunDB or something like that. That's trying to like fulfill that layer of like storing data in a decentralized manner. A lot of these, are still in progress, still being built. So I would like to give you a better answer. One might not 100% exist right now. That's why we're doing a lot of these sessions to like figure out how we can get more people thinking and building these solutions.
Yeah, that's right, because storing something private on a decentralized thing is kind of difficult.
Yeah.
But what I meant to say with the question was, if let's say we are building a dApp that is using a Web2 server to connect to the blockchain and do some stuff for the users, how do we ensure that that remains safe? Like,
Okay.
are there any tested and proven methods to keep our private keys safe, which are signing the whole deal?
Yeah. So you should definitely never, ever, ever store private keys anywhere. The way that you would interact with like a user in this case, when you look at specific things like creating users and accounts in the Web3 world, the way that works is like through a verified signature from their wallets. So that signature is like a hashed value derived from like their keys, and it's more from like their public keys that are just available anyway on the blockchain. But what happens there is that like you know through their wallet they verify ownership of like this public key, and there's some like hashed values and data between their public and private key there to verify that ownership. And then you would just like save like something from that signature or something from that public key to your server. So what you're actually saving on your servers to like reference like an actual user or an account is just a public key, which is available anyway publicly. There's nothing wrong with like storing that, and then the actual verification would happen through their wallet, through some type of like algorithm that you can like build, or some type of verifiable transaction through like something like ethers, or where on the Polygon side coming out with like some new stuff called with ZK technology. It's called Zero Knowledge, which is hopefully going to be helping a little bit more on that. But it's definitely something I think you'll be seeing a lot more products and building around over the next couple of months. So just quickly, because we're really almost out of time, I just wanted to run through the last couple slides just so you have everything else. So Metaverse. The Metaverse is an iteration of the internet, kind of like as a single universe, an immersive virtual world facilitated by the use of virtual reality and augmented reality headsets. So if you've ever seen Ready Player One, hopefully one day we can have that in real life. I don't know. I don't know if that's good or not if we have that in real life, but that remains to be seen. What I have here is like a quick walkthrough of Decentraland. Decentraland is a popular metaverse application where you connect your wallet and then you're in this like virtual kind of world where you can go around minting NFTs. These like little shirts are like NFTs that you can own and like use for your characters. Go to like different places. I think you can like mint pieces of land as well. I'm not 100% sure how it works, and like create these like awesome stuff. You can even like sell NFTs in these places, but this is more for creating. You can even like connect your wallet, signing on MetaMask there. But this is more for creating experiences. It's you take your DeFi, your NFTs, you bring them into this like immersive world. It's for like everything else to like tie in like the world of those two things kind of together a little bit. And I've thrown out a lot of ideas to you. I've thrown out a lot of things, like we've discussed a few things. One thing I wanted to call out was like, once you're through this process, as you've like start learning, if you want to apply those like in a sort of like a real world kind of application, we do have a 2-month long hackathon running at the moment. Started yesterday, going out to August 25th. So like as you start building things in this fellowship and start like learning, definitely if you want to participate for the first time in hackathon, this would be a cool place to do it. It's called Biddle It, and we're running that for the next 2 months. But yeah, I think we've asked a bunch of questions throughout, but I think I do have to run to another meeting now. So yeah, I mean, it was awesome. I really enjoyed the questions that you all had. I think you all are really doing some awesome stuff and like thinking through how to participate in this new space. So it's been awesome to hear.
Great. Thanks a lot, Rahat, for your time, and I'm pretty sure everyone has gotten a fair, a good amount of and metaverse, and definitely like looking at the kind of questions we are getting, I'm pretty sure like folks are really excited to build more on top of that. And once again, like really appreciate you taking out your time and helping out with the 101 over here.
Definitely. Awesome, yeah. Well, thank you.
Right. So, fellows, like we'll have another intro session tomorrow. It's going to be on DAO, storage, and infra. So it is going to be at the same time. So we'll be expecting you over there. Thanks a lot for joining. And as for the office hours for today from Deffolio, like I can do it at like I'll be there on Discord from 9:30 onwards. So in case anyone wants to hop off, let's take a half an hour break, and I'll be there by around 9:30 or 9:45. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Right.